The movie starts after an apocalypse where the whole Earth succumbs and suffers from hunger and drought. In the wasteland formerly known as Australia, there was a place called the Green Place, the few places with remaining natural resources that humans need. It was not surprising that the remaining humans were competing to find them. This girl is Furiosa, a member of the tribe that occupied the Green Place. She was picking apples with her friend that day when she saw bandits in the forest. She immediately blew a whistle to alert the others about the intruder. From a distance, Furiosa's mother heard the whistle and rushed with some horsemen to chase the bandits, but unfortunately, they had taken Furiosa away into the desert. The mother then used the fallen motorbike to chase the bandits. Meanwhile, Furiosa secretly bit the fuel hose so that the bandits' motorbike would lose all the fuel and stop. When they had covered tens of kilometers, the two bandits debated whether to let Furiosa go or take her to headquarters because they were assigned to bring evidence that led to the Green Place. After quite a debate, they decided to take Furiosa with them. When they almost reached the headquarters, Furiosa's mother saw them from a distance, and without wasting any more time, immediately shot them. Unfortunately, one of the bandits managed to enter the headquarters and was about to hand Furiosa over to the leader, but Furiosa cleverly knocked the bandit down. Unfortunately, another bandit dragged her into a tent where the leader lived. This bandit group was called the Biker Horde and was led by a warlord named Dementus, one of the gang leaders with great power, but they did not have enough resources to survive, so they needed natural resources from the Green Place. Therefore, he forced the dying bandit who Furiosa knocked down earlier to draw a map to the Green Place before he died, but Furiosa kicked him to death before he could draw anything. Seeing this, Dementus decided to take care of Furiosa, so that the girl would tell him the location of Green Place. Meanwhile, Furiosa's mother disguised herself as a member of the Biker Horde and planned to infiltrate their base. On the other hand, at the tent were two lackeys stealing the apples they brought from Green Place before. Shortly after, Furiosa's mother came and immediately killed one of them, but seeing the other was a woman, she decided not to kill her. She just left and took the rest of the apple and Furiosa, so that Dementus couldn't find the Green Place, but unfortunately, the woman she saved instead told all the bandits to shoot Furiosa and her mother, who was trying to escape from there. In the middle of the run, the mother was forced to stop because Dementus and his men were approaching. She told Furiosa to hide while she was going to block them, but because she was outnumbered, she was finally caught, and this made Furiosa worried. She came out of hiding when her mother was tied and tortured by Dementus, who threatened to kill her mother unless she wanted to tell him the location of the Green Place. The mother told her not to say anything, and finally, Dementus, who was fed up, immediately killed her in front of Furiosa. Since that night, Furiosa was forced to live with Dementus and his bandit gang. At such a small age, she had to see Dementus's brutality. He often held a gladiator fight between his thugs because he considered this as entertainment. He also pretended to be nice to Furiosa and even gave him a teddy bear as a gift in the hope that she would soften to him and tell him where the Green Place was. But Furiosa couldn't forget the tragic death of her mother, and no matter how well Dementus treated her, she never opened her mouth. One day, one of the gang members, the History Man, invited Furiosa to talk, but again, Furiosa refused to say a word. The man then explained about the tattoos on his body. As one of the living historians, he kept historical archives in these tattoos. It is said that he also recorded the condition of the world before it was hit by drought when humans still lived comfortably. Seeing that, Furiosa thought about getting a map to the Green Place tattooed on her left arm so that she would always remember the way home. The next day, Dementus's man caught a strange man who claimed to be a war boy. When his men checked the objects that the strange man had, they found strong evidence that he came from a place that had natural resources. Out of curiosity, Dementus went to where the war boy came from to ask for resources. That place was the Citadel, controlled by someone called Immortan Joe, who considered himself a god who could give heaven to his followers. He had an abundant water supply, and anyone who obeyed his orders would get enough water. Therefore, his followers, the war boys, and the local residents were even willing to die for him. Immortan Joe said that the war boy who had just died would go to heaven he called Valhalla, the name taken from Nordic mythology. After seeing this incident, Dementus and his gang were attacked by the war boys. Because they failed to get resources from the Citadel, Dementus planned to invade an area called Gastown, a place that had a relation that supplied fuel to the Citadel. He asked for help from one of his alliances, the Octobos, to attack Gastown. He planned to disguise Octobos's men as war boys so that the guards would open the gate. However, the plan didn't work, so Dementis decided to kill Octobos's men so that the guards would think that the Citadel troops were being attacked by the enemy and would open the gate for them. After the gate opened, Dementis' men immediately pointed their guns at the guards. After that raid, Dementis returned to Citadel and brought Gastown leader's severed finger to Immortan Joe while threatening to kill him if he refused to give him the water supply. At first, Immortan Joe wanted to mobilize troops to kill Dementis, but he changed his mind when he saw Furiosa, whom he thought was suitable to be his wife. Dementis said that he wouldn't give her because she was his daughter. He even made up a name and called Furiosa Little D, but for the first time, Furiosa finally opened her mouth and said that he was not Dementis' daughter. Hearing that, Immortan Joe made a very tempting offer where he would give Gastown to Dementis if he was willing to hand over Furiosa. Other than that, he also asked one of the doctors in biker horde called Organic Mechanic to treat Furiosa until she grows up. Without thinking twice, Dementis accepted the offer. He then took back the teddy bear he once gave to Furiosa and left the Citadel. After Dementis left, Furiosa was taken to where Immortan Joe's wives lived. Apparently, Immortan Joe had dozens of wives whose only job was to give birth to the war boys. If anyone gave birth to a girl, Immortan Joe wouldn't hesitate to kill the baby, and if anyone gave birth to 3 daughters, they would be made into a slave. There, Furiosa felt uncomfortable because one of Immortan Joe's sons, Rictus, kept touching her hair, so she decided to bald her hair, make a wig out of it, and when she had the chance, she ran away from that place. Didn't know where else to go, Furiosa disguised himself as a man and stayed at the Citadel. Apart from that, she also pretended to be mute so she wouldn't be caught. Then she went to work as a mechanic, and even though she didn't have any experience, she actually became a mainstay in this job. After a few years, Furiosa had now grown up and become a very reliable mechanic. One day, she was trusted to take part in Fury Road, a journey to find resource areas such as Gastown. That journey would be led by a commander named Praetorian Jack, who was very trusted by Immortan Joe. After preparing, Jack would lead the war boys and mechanics. The war boys' job was to look after their transport trucks they called the War Rig from bandit attacks, because every time they went on a journey, they would definitely meet bandits who wanted to seize their resources, and surely enough, they were raided by the bandits shortly after. In the middle of the raid, the bandits put dynamite under the War Rig machine, causing a fuel leak. As a mechanic, Furiosa tried to patch all the leaks. Meanwhile, Jack led the war boys to eliminate the bandits. At one moment, Furiosa's head cover was taken and her long hair was seen, revealing her true identity. Seeing this, Jack was shocked because women were prohibited from being mechanics. Even so, he didn't really care about these strange rules because the most important thing for him was that Furiosa was able to help him fight the bandits. After killing all the bandits, Furiosa threatened Jack with her gun because he had found out about her true identity. But unfortunately, Jack managed to push her out of the war rig, leaving her all alone in the desert. Furiosa couldn't help but have to survive in the middle of the desert without food, let alone water, but not long after, Jack returned and praised her skills as a mechanic and as a fighter. Apart from that, he also promised not to reveal her identity to anyone if she wanted to continue the journey with him. What's more, all the mechanics had died in the battle. Even though she had doubts, Furiosa finally wanted to come along. When they arrived at a fueling post, they received a report from the guard there that conditions in Gastown had become increasingly uncontrollable since being controlled by Dementis, and if it wasn't immediately taken over, then the place would definitely be destroyed. Without wasting any more time, Jack and the others went straight to Gastown. On the way there, he gave Furiosa a bomb gun as a gift, and since that day, the two of them became closer. In the evening, they had time to rest in a cave before continuing their journey towards Gastown. While Furiosa was sleeping, she had a nightmare where Dementis killed her, but luckily Jack was there to calm her down. Long story short, they continued their journey and finally reached Gastown, and as reported, the place looked very chaotic. Even Dementis could no longer manage some of his men. Slowly, they begin to distrust his leadership, who often blame others for his incompetence. Furiosa saw a chance to kill Dementis, but she backed down because the situation was chaotic. In the end, there was bloodshed. Because of the chaos, Jack and Furiosa decided to go back to the Citadel. They reported what happened in Gastown and the consequences to Immortan Joe. Hearing this, Immortan Joe ordered his men to prepare weapons and vehicles to slaughter Dementis and all the biker horde members. After reporting the condition of Gastown, Jack treated the wounds on Furiosa's body. At that moment, he saw a tattoo of a map to the green place on her left arm. He then held Furiosa's hand and said that he would take her to that place wherever it was. Hearing that, Furiosa believed that this man was a sincere person. The next day, Jack and Furiosa were trusted to lead the war boys to Gastown, but before they got there, Jack would go to Bullet Farm to arm the troops and divide the tasks. He and the war boys would drive the war rig, while Furiosa was assigned to be a backup behind by driving a V8 Interceptor. Initially, Furiosa refused because she wanted to lead along with Jack in the battle, but Jack didn't want to get her hurt, so he kept insisting, and Furiosa had to accept his decision. Long story short, they finally arrived at Bullet Farm, but unexpectedly, it turned out that Dementis had taken over the place and immediately confronted them all. In an instant, all the war boys were eliminated. Seeing that, Furiosa got up and started shooting the enemies one by one. Jack decided to force through the barricade using the war ray into the Bullet Farm. To help Jack, Furiosa shot the guards from a distance. Apart from shooting the guards, Furiosa also intended to kill Dementis as revenge for her mother's death, but Dementis managed to dodge the shot and took an RPG to shoot her. Luckily, Furiosa managed to avoid the attack. When she got up again, she saw Jack, whose life was being threatened, where Dementis' men were about to drop him and the war ray into a ravine. Without wasting more time, she immediately saved him. Seeing Jack and Furiosa manage to escape, Dementis rushed after the two of them. Jack asked Furiosa to focus on driving while he tried to stop the bikers. Unfortunately, their vehicle was overturned and they were captured by Dementis. He dragged them both and said to all his troops that Jack and Furiosa had hurt his heart. Before executing them both, Dementis made a passionate speech. After that, he ordered his men to punish Jack by dragging him on a motorbike. Meanwhile, he hung Furiosa in the back of his car, but not long after, Dementis was shocked because Furiosa had escaped by cutting off her left hand, which had a map to Green Place tattooed on it. She would rather lose her arm than suffer the same fate as her mother before. Dementis didn't stay silent. He mobilized troops to look for her before he lost track of her. Luckily, Furiosa managed to escape from Dementis' pursuit. From a distance, a man saw her staggering in the middle of the desert, and it turned out that the man was Max Rokotansky. He then took her to the Citadel to get treatment. When Furiosa woke up from fainting, she found herself in the Citadel underground area, guarded by an old lady. On the other hand, Immortan Joe and his sons were monitoring the burning Gastown. They suspected that it was all Dementis' doing. Not long after, Furiosa approached them and said that Jack had been caught. It seemed like Dementis had deliberately burned Gastown to lure Immortan Joe so they could take control of the Citadel. Unfortunately, Immortan Joe ignored Furiosa's advice and chose to go to Gastown. Before he left, Furiosa asked Immortan Joe to lead Dementis for her. When Immortan Joe had already left for Gastown, Dementis looked happy because there was an opening to attack the Citadel. Seeing this, Immortan Joe's men finally believed Furiosa's words and decided to return. On the other hand, Furiosa approached the mechanics to make a bionic hand for her, and after that the war began. Before following the Citadel troops, Furiosa shaved her hair and asked for a vehicle from the mechanics, but unfortunately, the only vehicle available was a battered car. Like it or not, she was forced to use it to get to the nearest war post. There, the Citadel troops had wiped out Dementis' troops and left only the History Man, which they considered still useful. Without thinking twice, Furiosa immediately seized Rictus's Jaga horse that was left there, which was one of the most powerful fighting cars in Westland. Meanwhile, Dementis, who had lost many troops, chose to flee the war. Meanwhile, the rest of his troops suddenly fell one by one, and it turned out that the person who killed them was Furiosa. Seeing that, Dementis told his men to split up so that Furiosa would be confused. Dementis then disguised himself using his men's clothes and then fled. The next day, Dementis woke up from his sleep and was about to continue his journey. But from a distance, he saw a silhouette which turned out to be Furiosa. Even though Furiosa had found him, she didn't immediately kill him and instead tortured him first by making him run in the foggy desert until he was exhausted as he had done to Jack. She then got out of the car while opening her mask and forcing Dementis to remember her. But because he had forgotten about her, Furiosa beat him many times until he remembered. When Furiosa took the teddy bear, Dementis immediately remembered her, but instead of feeling guilty, he felt proud because the girl he once cared for had grown up to be as cruel as himself. Hearing that, Furiosa didn't accept being compared to the person who had killed her mother. She then tortured Dementis as he did to Jack, being tied and dragged by a car, then burned like her late mother. She then brought the dying Dementis to the Citadel. She planted an apple tree over his body and let him die slowly and rot. She did that as a symbol of revenge for what he did to her. At the end of the movie, Furiosa secretly took all of Immortan Joe's wives into war rig and intended to take them to Green Place.